Hello, my name is Nicholas Kelly and I'm going to give you a quick overview of the Dashboard Wireframe Kit. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the contents, so what do you get in the box, and then I'm going to walk you through a quick example of how to use it. So in the box we have, of course, the chart cards. There's 54 chart cards of 20 different chart types in there. Of course, the most common ones being repeated for reuse. We have the KPI cards. There's 4 different types of cards for those. And then we have a stack of filter cards. We, of course, have the box itself. We've got the board. There's 2 sides to this board, which I'll talk about in a little bit. There is the user guide. And then, of course, there's this pen, the dry erase pen that you can use to write on the cards and the board. It's erasable, so you can quickly wipe things off. It's very, very fast and efficient, and high reuse value there. So let's talk in a little bit more detail about each piece of the elements that we have on the table here. Starting with the box, you can see I have the top off here, and I'll start taking out the components. So there is the user guide, which is an 8-page user guide. Tells you basically how to use it, any additional materials you need to know, and access to free training, of course, and how to use the kit. There is the board. So the board is stacked on top of here. It's a 2-sided board. Right, so this is the beauty of the entire system here, is that everything has 2 sides. So we have the typical layout here, and this was the layout that was used in the first edition of the kit that was funded on Kickstarter some years ago, where we have the key performance indicators, we have the charts, we have the filters. You can write in the title of your dashboard here, as well as the refresh rate of your data. And it's got some basic descriptors and explainers for people to enhance data literacy as you're talking to people, that you can just refer to, what's a KPI, why would you use it, how do you connect KPIs to charts, how do you use filters, basics about storytelling, story framing. So useful notes to have on this side of the board. And then for the other side of the board, we have the strategic layout. This tends to be more for executives. Use certainly less of the time, but it's got just a layout for key performance indicators and your filters, and of course title and the data refresh rate up there. Just bear in mind you can use the pen to write on all of this. It's all erasable, comes off very, very easily. So that's the board. It's a quad fold board, so it's easy portable and fits in right on top of everything here, which you can see. We have a few compartments. We have the chart cards. We have space for our KPIs and our filters, and we have the spot for our pen. Now, what's nice about this is if you get the available expansion packs, for example, Power BI, this box is designed so you can fit in 1 expansion pack, right? So it's just makes it easy. Then you can just take everything with you. So most people end up getting 1 expansion pack, whether that's Tableau, Power BI, or the advanced charts. You can fit it in here, so it's still quite portable, and you can still manage to put everything back in the box and close it up. Now I'm going to walk you through a quick example of how to use the Dashboard Wireframe Kit. You can use it as part of a longer type of process, where you involve stakeholders, have communication through interviews, surveys, workshops even, or you can just sit down with them and do it on the spot, do it very, very quickly. It's going to work in both types of processes. Let's imagine we're designing a tab on a dashboard for a human resources department, a human resources manager. This stuff works best when you target certain personas for who you're designing for. So let's imagine we're designing a tab for attrition on a HR manager dashboard. So I would start up at the top here, where I would say what it is. It's an attrition tab. And having conversations with the end users, we figured, it's going to be useful to have this as a weekly refresh for our data. So let's just put in weekly. Now, of course, daily is always nice, but the backend may not support it. So this facilitates that conversation. We can start increasing the data literacy of those folks that we end up working with in the business. Now we have our layout here. And what's quite useful here to facilitate conversations with folks is to talk about key performance indicators. And we have some guidelines here, right, that we can tell people the key performance indicators, they're big numbers at the top. Anything you see in gray is an example of a KPI. So we're saying, hey, look, big number, big number here. We want to show that and highlight it, but we also want to give it context, right? So we can say, oh, well, in this example, we're showing it went down 7% month on month. Would you like something like that for attrition? As well as the target. So we're giving some sort of reference. So very useful to have a conversation with folks to help them understand what they're doing and how important it is that we focus on high level KPIs, and then we can worry about the details maybe some other time. So let's focus on the cliff notes for attrition. On our filters, we have some examples here. So, for when we're having that conversation, okay, we could say supplier region. In this example, we're talking about attrition, so probably department, things like that would make sense. And then we have the charts. Now we give an example here of the context of telling a story and story framing here. If we need to share that with anyone, that's great. We have some other things to talk about: chart titles, right? So how important chart titles are, that they should be in the form of a question ideally. And then we talk about some best practices down here. So these are all useful things to facilitate conversations with people. But let's start wireframing our actual dashboard here. So let's pick a few KPIs. We're talking about a attrition dashboard. So what's going to be important here is, let's just say, percentage of employees at risk. Now I've got some that I made earlier just to make this thing a little bit faster. So I got percentage of employees at risk. So that's helpful. Let's look at anything else we might want to have. Maybe our retention. So what's our employee retention, right? So that's always going to be useful metric to know, right? So some things that are vitally important for us to be able to focus on are some of these very big KPIs. We might pick different KPIs, of course, right? So here's another one. So this is the count of employees at risk. Okay, just clean that up a bit there. Employees at risk. There's a count. I probably want to move these around because it makes a bit more sense. And this is the beauty of the kit. It's just very fast to be able to do all of this. Okay, so we don't have to bounce around doing, editing in some sort of tool. This low-tech approach makes it very fast to be able to do it. Now, here's another one. Predicted cost of attrition. So then this might beg the question, well, what's the current cost of attrition if we're predicting it? So we might say, you know what, retention is not that important, or it should be on a different tab of the dashboard. What I want to know right now is the cost, the current cost of attrition year to date. So you can see how this could facilitate a conversation. Now, I want to share with you something that's one of the key ingredients of the kit. It is the reverse side of the cards. Now, this is really important because for the KPIs, it tells us, when does this KPI change color? Okay, and I might say, well, okay, we're talking about employees at risk. Well, let's say if it goes over, I'm just going to put in, if it goes greater than 200, it's going to change color. I can also tell it which chart it's going to reference. So let's just say, for example, it's going to reference the chart that we're going to put in C2. Okay, it's going to reference that chart. So this is just all to help us facilitate a conversation with the stakeholders that we're working with. So we have employees at risk. We have percentage of those employees that are at risk of our total employees, the cost of attrition year to date, and the predicted cost. Right, so that can be quite a game changer for a lot of to drive action for people, especially a HR manager. Now let's look at one of my favorite types of charts and how we're going to start building these charts by using chart patterns. Now, whenever we're talking about a lot of people or a lot of products or a lot of widgets, I love having the bubble chart. This is chart number 14 in the deck. And let's just call it employees at risk, because the overall question we're trying to answer on this tab is who's at risk and why are they at risk, so that I can take action on that, or the HR manager can take action on it. So let's just call this for now employees at risk. Okay, and you can see just how quick this is. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. On the x-axis, let's just say their salary. So the further along to the right are, the higher their salary. So an employee at the bottom right has a very high salary. But what does the y-axis mean? And let's just say risk. So if they're high up, they're high risk of leaving the organization. So an employee at the top right is a high salaried employee with a high risk of attrition. And let's also say the size could be the cost of attrition or the predicted cost of attrition. So a big bubble on the top right is really a problem. We want to focus on the ones up in this quadrant maybe. So this is how you can quickly have a conversation with your stakeholders and agree on what makes sense for them based off what actions they're trying to take. When we think about action, let's look at the reverse of this card. We can say, well, what is the question we're trying to answer? So I'm going to say who is at risk? Is at risk. And then what action? Well, for now, I'm just going to identify at risk people. There's the action I'm taking. Okay, great. So we've got that. Next chart. I'm looking at this and, this is a conversation you would have with whoever you're talking with. Does it make sense to view them by department? Do you want to view them by attrition, reason? So what's causing them? So we could say reasons for attrition. Okay, and then we could say, well, the x-axis is the reasons. So every bar here is a reason, and then the y-axis is the count. Okay, so we have that example. Now again, you would do the back of this, right? So you could say, on the reverse side of this, you could write down, okay, well, the question I'm answering are, what are the top reasons that people are leaving the organization? And then, on the action, it is identify the top reasons people are leaving the organization. Now, you could have other actions, of course, and I'm just trying to keep this one simple. But you could see how this would help facilitate a conversation with people. We've got that. Now, it's always going to be helpful to look at some sort of trend over time and see how this has been going over historically. So we could just say trend of attrition. Okay, and then these can be, of course, months maybe. Let's just say past 24 months. And of course, the Y is the count. Okay, so count of attrition. Okay, and then you would do the same at the back. Okay, so we'd always just make sure, maybe the question is, how has attrition been changing over time? And finally, in this tab, I'm recommending a table, which is the row level detail of the employees at risk. And let's look at this. Imagine I select those 3 employees over here. I can see it. This will update and it'll show me, okay, here's the reasons for their attrition. We might just find maybe it's just one bar. Maybe just one bar telling us, oh, for these high salaried, high risk employees, they have the same reason. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they're all different reasons, but that will tell us. We can see how that has been historically, how those reasons have caused or contributed to attrition over time historically. Maybe it's a new trend, right? And maybe it's just popped up. And then finally, I can see the row level detail for the employees, maybe who their supervisors are, what's their tenure, what's their span of control, all the various details I'd want to know. Now, filters. Of course, we're going to want to be able to filter by department. We might be able to filter by what's called span of control. So how many people they manage, if any. And then another filter, maybe by their level, the level within the organization. So you can see how with this example, it could be very, very quick to have a conversation with someone and design their dashboard with a focus on what's important and using some of this text here on the board that can facilitate and help understand why it's important to do it in a certain way and how a KPI can feed into the charts in the dashboard and ultimately drive action. And the last action ultimately we're trying to figure out is who is at risk and why are they at risk, so that we can take some sort of action. Maybe it's, okay, their supervisor or manager's performance is consistently causing people to leave an organization. So maybe let's figure out what we can do with that manager, right? Or maybe another one is people are leaving because they're working too many hours. We could figure that out from this specific tab. And since we designed for action, we know what we're going to do about it. So that's a quick overview of both the contents of the kit and how to use it.